Hey everyone, welcome to Alumless. Thank you so much for listening. Today is Friday, May 10th, and this is the Boosting Alumni Engagement Metrics edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood. I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Marshall. How's it going, Chris?
Great. Good to see you again, Ryan.
Good to see you too, back in the chair here for another episode of Alumless. Love doing it. A special episode today, our 50th, which is kind of hard to believe.
I know it's flown by.
Flown by, indeed. On the show, we talk about engagement strategies in advancement. And today we are live, so please chime in with your questions or comments in the LinkedIn event. Be sure to say hello where you're tuning in from. We'd love to chat with you and entertain your questions during the show, either to myself or Chris, or of course, our special guests, Melissa Schipke and Cooke Smith, who we will bring out in just a couple of moments. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast edition of the show so that you can catch our 30-minute bonus segment with today's guests, Jenny and Melissa, and all of our special guests. Want to make sure that we mention our fantastic presenting sponsor. Protopia has created a transformational AI-powered technology that matches questions from students or recent grads with alumni all over the world that are perfectly positioned to answer those questions. Without asking alumni to be mentors or participate in programs spread out over months or sign up for an app or a platform, Protopia makes scaling introductions simple. Questions get submitted and Protopia's AI does all the work. Protopia can even target stakeholders like young alumni or lapsed donors and provide them with a meaningful volunteer experience. Visit protopia.co/alumless for more details and to check out the technology that schools like Duke, Denison, Florida State, and the London School of Economics are using to make alumni networks available to everyone all over the world. All right, Chris, well, it's great to be back. Today's the 50th show, as I've mentioned. You know, I'm not sure we would have thought that 2 years later we'd still be doing it. I guess that was kind of our hope for, when we started doing Alumless episodes, that it would be something that kind of caught on and would be a thing. And I think it's fair to say that we've achieved thingness, But what would you say has been the most interesting or surprising part of doing Alumless?
Well, first, kudos to you. You're the driving force behind this and our host, and you're so good at it. And others have acknowledged the same, Ryan. So you make it easy for the guest, for me. You create great conversation. So that's been one of the reasons why I think it's gone so well and lasted for so long. Yeah, it's been great. Two areas that sort of jumped up to me when I was thinking about this question was there are people who are, subtly lobbying to be a guest on Alumless, which was a surprise to me. Like, I didn't think it was that going to be a thing, but people kind of want to be on, which is a good thing, I think. And the other one, which I've been really proud of for our work, is that there are a lot of folks that are using it as a training tool, where they make sure that they or their team or sometimes together watch it. And it's part of their, every other week sort of regimen to keep up to date on what's happening in the industry, which I think is just a great thing. Because I've used it in the same way. I've told, I have several clients where they have a new person in alumni engagement, a couple of cases where they're new to the field. And so what should I read? What should I do? And I say to them, watch the other 49 episodes to get caught up. We had one client recently just tell us they just finished watching the 49th one. They've seen every single one and they're tuning in live today. So that
was just the other day, right? When we were on campus. What's been my favorite part too is how folks have been listening to it and using it for professional development or to fill time, when they're doing something else, exercising, walking the dog. So, but I guess why AEM, Alumni Engagement Metrics, for our 50th episode? Like, why? We were talking about it. We came up with some different ideas on what might be a good topic for the show. Why do you think this is the right thing?
We wanted special guests for sure for our 50th show. We wanted really smart people. So we found two of the smartest people we could find. We'll bring them out here in a moment. And they're both fantastic. You'll see in a minute. But for me, I'm kind of a closet data nerd, and I love this kind of stuff. And even going back to when I used to coach swimming, I was a collegiate coach for 12 years. And I love the data and the predictive modeling of what you can do with data, looking at scoring. So it was just something sort of I always did, and I was good at it and I enjoyed it. So when we got to the point of coming up with that 50th theme, it made sense. And plus the other reason, Ryan, as you well know, is that every single one of our clients are somewhere on the journey of thinking about this. Some are just sort of going, holy cow, how do we start this? And others are pretty sophisticated with some really cool models and, tools that they are using to help, display and, image it and all that. But it's a journey. No matter where you are, you're not done. It's never one of those things that's finished. So I think that's going to be the fun part of this, is that you'll be able to help clients at different points along that journey.
Yeah, and there really are some blocks set up along the way, right?
Yeah.
To prevent folks from really exploring and getting a great understanding of the engagement metrics that they're seeing at their
Yep.
school or institution, all the way from do we have the personnel that's available to do the reporting, right? Do we have the infrastructure to be able to capture the data that we need? Data is coming from all over campus, right? How do we grab it? And they're often in disparate systems, right?
Exactly right.
There's definitely some challenges. All right, well, let's bring out our experts.
While you're
today,
bringing them
our
out, for the folks that are on, jump on and just say hi. Shout out where you are, where you're from. Say hello. We'd love to have you chat in so we can know who's here. But let's go ahead, Ryan. Bring in our guests.
Yeah, and thanks to Katie, Chuck, and Kim and Tara from saying hello. Thank you for joining us, and everybody else who's tuning in today. All right, well, let's bring out our special guests, Jenny Cooke Smith from Case. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, how's it going?
And Melissa Schipke from Tassl. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Great. Good to see you both. I told you we have two of the smartest people we can find to be on the show. No pressure. No pressure.
Jenny Cooke Smith is Senior Director for Case Insight Solutions, and Melissa Schipke is Founder and CEO of Tassl. So we've got two people here who know each other from conversations about engagement metrics over the years. And we're thrilled to have them both joining us today. Jenny, first question over to you is, thinking about the team at Case has now conducted the survey on alumni engagement metrics for few years now. 4, I think, is the number, and with years of data at the moment, with year 5 forthcoming.
You got it.
What should advancement vice presidents know about alumni engagement now that things have been uncovered or discovered by the survey over the last few years?
Yeah, it's funny. I think for me, this is almost like I've learned in practicing yoga, or now as an adult learner trying to really be able to speak Spanish. It's like the more I learn on this topic, the more I realize there is to learn. And so I think that as we've delved into the engagement metrics, it very much feels like that. I think if we think of sort of a good investigator with a who, what, why, how, I'll leave out when for a moment, because I think when is sort of where we finally are right now. But I do think this idea of engagement metrics started with the why. And I think about, the work, Chris, that you were so instrumental in, and establishing that white paper and really saying, like, let's get some common definitions and a framework. And then I think we moved to the how and the what, which is sort of the how do we actually pull this information? I think, to your point, Brian, that's an ongoing conversation. And I think collaboration is a real answer to that. And I think that might be a theme as we're talking through some of these pieces today. I definitely think one thing vice presidents need to know is this only works if it's collaborative in nature, because to your point, we're not talking about things that happen in just advancement. We really care about engagement across the institution. And then as we think about this idea of what, to me, if I look back to when we started, and Chris, you maybe remember these conversations, I think we were almost apologetic about, we know we don't have weights and scores. We know we don't. We'll get there. It's okay. It's okay. And I think as a business, we all started with like the most complex thing, which was how do we build scores? Which, looking back and thinking about doing that, especially for comparison benchmarking for something we were just trying to learn a little bit more about and how to quantify, we should have been much kinder on ourselves. But I do think learning this idea of, oh, okay, we can measure this and actually find out a lot from some really simple questions has been truly key. And, that's a place where I think the members came to us and said, oh, guess what? We just started using this data, and these are the things we found out. And I'd say the things are, examples such as, oh, our alumni that are engaged across all 4 modes are our most valuable alumni. And now we can quantify that. We're finding things like, oh, the alumni that were at our institutions for the longest amount of times and got multiple degrees engage at higher rates in every mode. I think these are stories that, we just felt that, but we never could really quantify it. And I think one last piece of that is we can now show, at least in the most recent findings, 81% of engagement, at least in the data that we collect now, is not monetary. It's not philanthropic. And so when I think about the real answer to what do VPs need to know, I think it's that number. And then we come back to the why, right? Because I think we're now at the stage where we're really trying to tell the story of, and why does engagement matter? We know that it's more than giving. What are all the things? How does it lead to giving? But also, how does it lead to outcomes that are so critical for our institution overall? You can tell I'm excited about this.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
And Melissa, we've worked to develop processes over the years, taking the framework that Chris and Jenny and everyone created on the task force, these modes for engagement. And we've been working over years, the most recent few years, to kind of develop engagement metrics, reportable engagement metrics, sometimes with additional scoring models, but at least, counting activity levels sort of that's the starting point, wrapping your arms around as much engagement activity that's happening out there as possible. What are some of the roadblocks that you see that working with schools often prevent educational organizations from understanding the ROI of alumni engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it great even in your intro. It really kind of comes down to three main things, and that's the access, time, and budget. Where access is around, do people even have access to that data? Is it digestible in the way that they can access it? What is the administrative burden that goes into, getting the information that you really need to put together a really robust engagement scoring or metrics? And then the time, like I said, too, because of the administrative burden of things and the kind of the convoluted processes that exist for the alumni relations side, they're doing all these different programs and having all these amazing touch points, but the time to actually then look at the data or digest the data or even access it in real time to make and influence decisions just doesn't really exist in the modern day alumni relations structure. And that kind of leads to, the budget issues of, do they have the budget for not only the people, the right people to do it, or the budget to update and maintain the right tools to really kind of reduce that administrative burden and make it easier to be accessing data on a more regular basis that's digestible.
Well, one of the obstacles early on that I have identified is that it's the institutional will, which is, I think, right before those other three that you mentioned. You got to be willing to do this, right? And there are some VPs who don't think there's a need to. Others don't think it's important or want to spend any resources on it. But increasingly, we're seeing more people realize the benefit of it and the outcome. That's anyway.
Yeah, and definitely more people. Like I've seen a shift over the years in the willingness aspect of it too, because a lot of people kind of get stuck in the processes that they have, and in alumni relations, people in alumni relations are some of the most creative people I've ever met, and being able to figure out how to make something work with some of the most broken pieces they figured out, just very creative ways to make it work. But it takes so much time. So I think, where people are more willing is the fact that, if they're able to streamline those processes and get time back, and they're really seeing the value of using that data, they're the willingness has kind of gone through much higher than we've seen in the past.
I think we sometimes hear the term Trojan horse as it comes to things like using engagement even as a campaign goal. That's the thing, but that's what gets us all these pieces that we know really take us to that next point.
For sure.
Jenny, back to you with a question. The insight report from this most recent version 22 and 23 is due out pretty soon.
23 is coming. I was told I can't guarantee this month. We feel very good about saying June, but in the next few weeks it'll be due out.
But the most recent
Jenny almost breaking some news.
I know, we're really close to having some scoop there. But one of the interesting critical observation out of it was it gets to the when part, which is that the philanthropic activity really starts to increase after 11 years coming out of graduation. Let me make sure I asked the question right. what do you think that statistic means for how schools should be thinking about their alumni engagement strategy? I mean, what was the kind of the aha moment in that data point for you is what I want to ultimately hear.
Sure.
Well,
So I'm going to be totally transparent with you for a moment and tell you, one of the things we realized in collecting that data and doing some of the analysis last year is that we were missing one critical component, which is legally contactable alumni for each of those graduation cohorts. So you're right. When we look at the numbers and we parse out the first 5 years, the next 5 years, and then we look at years 11 to 20. So sort of those deciles, we do see that increase. It's a little noise by looking at some of the 5s and 10s. So what I'll tell you is a scoop for this year, because where I think it's going to be really critical is, now that we've got that legally contactable alumni, what we can start to show is one data point that I think will be the least surprising data point to anyone, which is the longer they've been out since graduation is when we start to see those stair steps. So to your point, we're seeing more participation in that 11 to 20 than the 0 to 5 and the 6 to 10 and continued up. What I'm really excited about, and I've seen Ryan present on this several times, is this idea that now that we can look at those non-monetary modes, we're really seeing that there tends to be that U of we're getting them engaged in volunteerism and experiential through communication early on. We're seeing a dip as people get busy with careers and families. Makes a lot of sense. And then we see that come back up. And so understanding that big trend, I think then institutions can start to overlay, what am I doing? I was just working actually early this morning with a school that doesn't see that U shape. And then you start to think about, well, how are you keeping them on board and why are those strategies working? So that's probably the piece I'm most excited about in this forthcoming data as we start to analyze that.
Cool.
Yeah. And Jenny, to add to that the U is like, it's really fascinating because it builds a whole new level of strategy of how do you make sure those people do not unsubscribe from your communication? Like, how do you make sure you're not over communicating to the people when they're in the bottom of the U, but keeping them informed so that when they are getting back to the top of that U and back in an area where they are willing to engage, they're somebody you can actually still contact, not losing them during that period.
On this one topic. Yes, I agree.
We definitely could. And I'm sitting here thinking about, okay, the U, right? And there's a dip. Should we be focusing our attention on those at the bottom of the U, or should we be focusing our attention elsewhere when people are more likely to be back and with time,
Yeah.
It's tricky, right? When resources are finite, but I guess that's where engagement scoring can come in, Melissa. I think it's one thing for colleges or universities to track alumni engagement activity. It's a whole nother thing altogether to develop scoring models. And we were just talking about being, kind on ourselves because developing these scoring models and engagement score is not easier. But why do you think engagement scoring is important, and how can schools use engagement scores to make life easier?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really kind of provides the structure on the data and a deeper level of insight to, really kind of gain insights on not only your engagement strategy, but what that alumni experience is, and really kind of not only benefit from understanding how it relates to donor activity, but like Jenny had mentioned, the value add of the volunteerism and other engagements that they can be participating in, and that value add to the whole the university as a whole and the offerings that they have is can sometimes be weighed just as significant as the donations, I think, specifically with some of the younger generations and where their value propositions are with higher ed right now. And so, from an engagement perspective too, we're no longer really dealing with the generations that don't have a ton of opportunities to connect to organizations professionally and socially after they graduate. So we're now competing for their attention span after they graduate in a much more significant way than we ever have. And so by being able to leverage data and engagement scoring, you can really create some more personalized experiences for your alumni in the way you're communicating with them, the types of programs and resources that are going to resonate well with them versus kind of just throwing everything at them all the time, which could lead to what we were just speaking about potentially losing them at a point where then, they're not ready to engage and then not being able to contact them when they're back. So, we've seen other industries really leverage data in a way that creates a very personalized experience. And where I think the use of engagement metrics and scoring, it will really help bring higher ed back up to pace with what we're seeing across other engagements.
You can kind of imagine a scenario whereby, let's say you've got content that's career themed in nature, right? Maybe it's social media content, maybe it's a career themed event, but then those people who are interested in those are interested in career themed volunteerism type activities around mentoring, around being involved in other types of panel discussions that might be relevant, and engagement metrics playing a really helpful role in offering leads onto what might be a personalized ask of someone or a group of people towards what they're interested in. And I always felt like engagement metrics were really helpful internally too, right? To be able to showcase the engagement activity that we were doing on behalf of the different colleges or schools at the university, or using engagement metrics to select new members for the alumni board, or provide gift officers with, a top 100 list, of prospects that are maybe engaged but under giving, for their. But so there's so many different opportunities. Chris, when you think about our university partners that kind of struggle in this area, right, to get engagement metrics up and running, what do you think the challenges for the teams there to develop an effective approach for reporting on engagement activity and developing scores? How should they get going?
Yeah, the number one reason is that they're too busy, frankly. I mean, our alumni engagement profession, plates are overflowing everywhere, and so to think about, to do all the work we do, and then at the end of it all, track it all, put it in a system, and come back with some kind of model that says, here's how it all went, is like almost impossible, unfathomable thought for many institutions. So it's a matter of prioritizing it and saying it's going to be important, and doing other things, stop doing other things, doing things, without the same level of volume or the same number of events, whatever it is that you're doing. So you have time to do the post work that needs, I think, that comes from whether or not you send out an email or what the board meeting was like or the event, etc. Doing that part of the follow-up, I think, is just a critical component. I also think it's a responsibility of our industry, to be honest with you. I've observed over the 20 years the maturation of our industry because of things like this. We're seeing alumni professionals move into vice president for advancement roles. We're seeing higher pay in some cases around the alumni leader role, a higher value placed on the role within an organization. And always, it's up to us to help our industry to do this kind of work. So for me, it's we got to get past the obstacle of we're just too busy to get to it. We have to slow it down and get to the point where we're doing this. And we're going to need advancement service office. We were talking about this on the right before we got on the show with our guests, is that the advancement service office of the future needs to factor this into their work. It's not just, they're sort of built to track and count for all the fundraising activity. And we need that to become part of all the engagement activity as well. And it's slowly happening. You're starting to see it across our industry, but we have work to do there for sure.
Well, and Chris, I guess the one thing I would also add to that is, in addition to time, I do think it's like that measure versus count piece, this idea of we know there are engagement activities that we'll never be able to count. And sort of that, if we know time's limited, how do we prioritize the outcomes that are most critical to our institutions? And that's where we really worry about that data capture, strategically integrating it into those pieces.
Yep. Agreed.
Is this a
question to follow up, and you did it without me asking, Jenny?
Well, I was actually going to ask you, Jenny, do you, from Case's perspective, maybe personally or just on behalf of the organization, do you kind of feel some sort of like responsibility to like push, engagement metrics to get it out there? I mean, I know you do to a degree, but I just thought I would ask, right?
No, and I've had these sort of moments since I've been at Case where I keep relearning the same thing, which is I'll be in rooms with people and you start to see these like light bulb moments when everyone realizes this is actually the key to everything we're doing. Like if we can't figure this out, then when we think about our pipelines for the future, when we think about our sustainability, when we think about working with our Marcoms colleagues, we think about the needs of our advancement services, like engagement's kind of the glue in all of it. And it's been so fun to sort of be in rooms where people come to that conclusion and that we start to understand that this isn't just helping one part of the profession. This is the profession and the future of the profession.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I 100% agree. And I think that the use of segmentation is like really that key that sticks between comm and engagement. And engagement metrics are the only way to really build the most appropriate segments and audiences and really define those personas that should be leveraged by the Marcom teams and to provide that kind of personalized experience and not lose those contacts. It's like that's like the critical key to all of it.
Oh, and just to get just a touch geeky on this. So one of the things we've recently been doing is trying to understand the people that have taken a survey that we call a Cases Inclusion Index. And this is really trying to understand advancement maturity model around DEIB. Even if you can't say that in your institution, it's still this idea of those pieces of belonging and diversity and how are we bringing our diverse communities together. And we looked at the group that had done the engagement survey and had done that. And what we found were the two areas where we saw the highest correlation was philanthropy and volunteerism. And what we saw was programs that invested in training their volunteers on diversity had higher volunteer engagement. Programs that had staff devoted to distinct identity groups had higher philanthropy and volunteer engagement. And so I think, when we think about all these pieces and using that data, I think it's sort of the same parallel, right? When you invest in one, we're going to see these boats lift up.
Yeah, great. Love hearing that.
Chris, we've got just a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure that we have a chance. We teased a special announcement on today's show. And then it's hard to believe we've bumped up against our first half an hour here, but the conversation will continue with Jenny and Melissa on the podcast edition. So tell Chris, what's the big announcement we've been teasing today?
I don't know, Ryan. What are you talking about? Melissa is going to help us at CMAC by coming in as our engagement metrics analyst guru. We got to come up with a title, Melissa. You got to come up with whatever title you want.
Vice President and Senior Consultant, right?
There you go. Right. But we come up with a subtitle that's really cool, and we'll give it to you.
I like engagement guru. I like data.
Engagement data guru for sure.
But what we're going to do really is deploy Melissa with our clients to allow for just a turnkey solution to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to respond to the case metrics, to develop a scoring model, to analyze your data, to show all the stuff we've just been talking about. We can now do it with Melissa's help. So stay tuned for more, but that's the big announcement. We're very excited, Melissa, and welcome and thank you.
Yeah.
Melissa, so excited to have you with us. Just a couple thoughts about this new partnership.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. You guys all have known me for quite some time. I've been preaching the world of data and engagement metrics for over a decade now in this space. And so, we know not every institution has the budgets to take on new tech, like tech limitations and things like that in regards to things with Tassl. So it's exciting to kind of come from this end too, to also just continue the preach of data.
Yeah. From the pulpit of data. Yeah.
Yes.
That makes total sense. Well, having known you for years and worked with you before, helping me in my previous role establish, that turnkey engagement metrics reporting and helping work with me to develop, a strategy for engagement scoring when I did not have internal resources to build up that aspect of the program, but I know I needed it. And I know everybody out there who's listening to this is thinking to themselves, I really could use help with engagement metrics, no matter where you are in that journey. And so that's, as part of our future at CMAC, we're looking to help with that. All right, Chris, before we hop over, who is our next guest?
Well, one of those I mentioned in my comments earlier about we have a lot of examples today of vice presidents for advancement who started out in the alumni engagement space. And one of them is our next guest, John Feudo, who's now at UMass Lowell, long career, Boston College, UConn for a long period of time. He's a wizard on the engagement side who's become a wizard on the fundraising philanthropy side. He's just an amazing leader, great guy, a lot of fun. And so John will be our guest in 4 weeks. So we're taking a break over the Memorial Day. So we have a little bit of a skip, and then we'll come back with John on June 7th.
Yeah. And I think John even wrote a book too, right?
John has written like 6 books. So
yeah.
And I had a chapter in one, but he's amazing. He's been so prolific.
I think I was called for research in one of his books, but you have a chapter. That's impressive. I'm going to need to read the Marshall chapter.
He's my favorite book that he's written of all. I mean, he's done a whole bunch of really cool ones, but I use it all the time with clients is Herding Cats, the art of volunteer management kind of title to the book, which is appropriate.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kim Infanti, for live LinkedIn posting, LinkedIn commenting.
I see it, yeah,
during our show and being our fantastic engagement strategist, helping us out with our digital presence and amplifying Alumless. All right. Well, our show is only just begun for this week. We're going to say goodbye to our live audience and record another 30 minutes with our special guests, Melissa and Jenny. And we'll be back in your feed on June 7th. So thank you so much and take care.
Thanks both.